Hello. My name is Rowena Keene. And I walked down the aisle with 3 empty chairs where my family should have been. Not late. Not lost. Just gone. On purpose. They didn't forget me. They erased me. And this is how you survive the wedding they never planned to show up for. The chapel smelled faintly of lilies and melting wax. I stood at the far end of the aisle, adjusting the folds of my gown with fingers that wouldn't stop trembling. Light streamed in through stained glass in fractured colors, blue, crimson, gold, but nothing felt sacred. It was all staged. Polished. Hollow. There were 90 chairs arranged perfectly in rows. Every one of them filled. Except 3. 3 chairs in the front row. Marked with names. Reserved for the people who were supposed to be mine. My mother. My father. My sister. They weren't late. I knew that before the music started. I took one step forward. Then another. Each click of my heel against the polished floor felt louder than the quartet's strings. Every head turned. Every eye settled on me, scanning for signs of what they already assumed. The bride without a family. The orphan with a designer gown. Some offered small, sad smiles. Others whispered. One woman, a friend of Graham's mother, looked genuinely confused, like maybe I was some stand-in bride, or the ceremony hadn't started yet, and she'd missed something. I kept walking. I didn't look at the chairs again. I couldn't. I saw them in my periphery, like ghosts seated beside each other, watching me with the same indifference they'd worn for years. Graham was waiting at the altar. Handsome. Composed. Slightly too composed. He smiled when I reached him, but it didn't reach his eyes. I remember wondering, just for a second, if he had called them. If maybe he thought he had, and they just chose not to come. But I knew better. The vows were a blur. I said the words. He said them back. We kissed. Cameras flashed. And just like that, we were married. Outside, the photographer positioned us against ivy-covered stone. He barked instructions: tilt your chin. Laugh with your eyes. Pretend this is the happiest moment of your life. I did. I smiled so hard my cheeks ached. Graham barely touched me. A reporter from a local lifestyle magazine asked about the absent chairs. I froze. Graham stepped in. They live out of state, he said smoothly. Scheduling conflict. I wanted to laugh. Inside the reception hall, the room pulsed with music and champagne and polished conversations. Everyone was in their best clothes, talking about real estate and renovations and second homes in the Carolinas. I stood by the cake table, alone. Graham was making rounds, shaking hands like this was a fundraiser. I looked at my phone. Nothing. No text. No voicemail. Just a promotional email from a candle brand and a reminder about our honeymoon itinerary. I refreshed the screen. Still nothing. It didn't surprise me. But it still hurt. Not in a sharp way. Not like a slap. It was deeper. Like a weight sitting on my chest, pressing down slowly, persistently. The kind of pain that doesn't make you cry, it makes you quieter. I remembered standing in the hallway at 10 years old, holding a ribbon I'd won in a school art contest. First place. I'd waited all evening to show them. But they were too busy helping Callista rehearse for her dance recital. My mother glanced at the ribbon and said, "That's nice, honey," before turning back to the sequins Callista insisted be sewn tighter. I didn't cry then either. I just folded the ribbon and put it in the drawer. Like I was folding away something more permanent. I checked my phone one last time. Still blank. The band started playing the first dance. Graham came to get me. We swayed under the chandelier while guests watched, clapped, took videos. His hand on my waist was light. Professional. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded. He didn't ask again. Later that night, I stepped onto the balcony of our hotel suite. The city spread out beneath me in glittering silence. My veil fluttered in the wind. I stared out at the lights, wondering how a place so loud could feel so empty. Inside, Graham was already in bed, scrolling through emails. I pressed my palm against the glass. The reflection stared back, flawless makeup, hair still curled, dress still perfect. I whispered, my wedding had 3 empty seats that screamed louder than any vow. The vibration in my hand was so soft, I almost didn't feel it. My veil had drifted over my shoulder in the wind, catching the edge of the phone just enough to pull my attention away from the city's glitter. One new notification. I didn't expect an apology. I didn't even hope. But a part of me, stupid, quiet, still aching, wondered if it was someone finally realizing what they'd missed. It wasn't. I tapped the screen. Instagram. A tag from a mutual cousin. I opened it without thinking, and for a split second, I saw my name beside Callista's photo. Then it vanished. Removed. As if I had never been there. I tried again. Her profile. Blocked. I'd been blocked. Blocked from seeing the wedding photos. Blocked from knowing who was there, who toasted, who danced. It wasn't just silence anymore. It was intentional. Measured. They didn't just not show up. They locked me out of remembering. I sat down on the edge of the bed, fingers motionless on my lap. I tried to laugh, but it caught in my throat. Instead, I stared at the screen, watching the icon spin. A message popped up from another cousin. A screenshot. It was a Facebook post. A family friend had written, "At least Callista invited us." That other one? What was her name again? Below it, someone else had commented, "Real family shows up where the love is." There were heart emojis. Laughing faces. Rows of clapping hands. I blinked at the screen, my heart beating in places that hadn't throbbed in years. Not from anger. Not yet. It was disbelief, the kind that burns quietly before it explodes. Graham came out of the bathroom, towel slung over his shoulder, half distracted. "Everything okay?" I nodded too quickly. "Just tired." He didn't ask again. By the time he slid into bed, his phone had already lit up with work emails. I turned away, letting my gown crease under me, letting the makeup smear against the pillow. I remembered a day when I was 16, walking in from school, clutching a manila envelope with my early acceptance to college. My hands had been shaking then too. It was a big deal. Full ride. Competitive program. I'd placed it on the kitchen counter like it was treasure. My mother glanced at it while frosting cupcakes for Callista's cheerleading fundraiser. "That's great, honey," she'd said, without looking up. "Just don't forget to thank your teachers." The fridge behind her had been covered in Callista's trophies. Not mine. Not a single thing of mine. I wasn't a disappointment. I was invisible. I stood from the bed and walked to the window. Austin was quiet at this hour, pulsing gently beneath the clouds. I turned my phone back on, opened Callista's profile. Still blocked. I scrolled back through my own feed. Birthdays. Promotion announcements. A photo of the community center I'd helped design. Posts that had no comments from my parents, no likes from my sister. But they'd reposted Callista's engagement video 4 times. I tapped unfollow on her profile. Then my mother's. Then my father's. Then the uncles. The aunts. One by one. Slowly. My thumb hovering for a breath each time. Not from revenge. Not from rage. But from survival. I poured a glass of champagne from the bottle the hotel had gifted us. It was too warm. Too flat. I set it on the table and didn't touch it again. The suite around me looked like a catalog, every detail curated, romantic, expensive. But it felt like a showroom. Like a place meant to impress guests, not house love. Graham's phone buzzed again. He didn't stir. A new text lit up my screen. From him. Work thing came up. Won't make it home tomorrow night. Don't wait up. I stared at the message. My eyes didn't even blink. The wedding wasn't even 24 hours behind us. But he was already checking out. Quietly. Politely. The way people do when they think being nice is enough to excuse being absent. I didn't reply. I walked to the bathroom, unpinned my hair in silence. Removed each bobby pin like peeling off armor. My skin under the foundation looked pale. Older. I soaked a cotton pad in makeup remover and watched my face return. Slowly. Softly. The woman staring back didn't cry. She just watched. I learned quietly, slowly, gently in ways they never imagined. The next morning, I packed my bag before Graham woke up. I left a note. Nothing dramatic. Just a simple sentence, "I'll be at the apartment." When I arrived, the place felt too clean. Too untouched. I dropped the suitcase by the door, walked barefoot to the kitchen, opened the fridge. Empty. Not in a forgotten way. In a way that said, no one lives here yet. No one really had. I sat on the couch, scrolled through my feed again. Saw another post, Callista's wedding photos now public on someone else's page. Her smile beaming, her gown flawless, her arms wrapped around our parents. Everyone dressed in matching navy and silver. Caption: what a day for a real family. I didn't feel tears. I felt stillness. The kind that comes after a storm. That was the moment I knew the silence wasn't peace yet, but it was the first sound that belonged only to me. The silence didn't heal. It echoed. Every corner of my apartment carried it, the hum of the refrigerator, the faint click of the air vent, the soft, metallic breath of the city outside. Silence has a way of growing teeth when you sit in it too long. It chews through reason, leaving only the question, how far would they go to erase me? I opened my laptop, thinking maybe a distraction would help. I wanted to watch the speech I'd given at the reception. It wasn't much, just a few minutes I'd recorded myself rewriting, a thank you to those who believed in second chances. A part of me wanted to hear my own voice again, to remind myself that the woman in the gown had once meant what she said. The folder was empty. For a second, I thought I'd clicked the wrong drive. I checked again. Nothing. My throat tightened. I opened the backup device the AV team had mailed a week before the wedding. I scrolled through the files, photos, audio clips, and there it was, a single video labeled irrelevant.mov. Irrelevant. My chest tightened, not from sadness, but from something sharper, precision. The cruelty wasn't in the deletion. It was in the word. Someone had renamed it, intentionally, like a joke whispered behind a closed door. I clicked it open. The screen flashed, then blacked out. Corrupted file. I sat very still. The city noise outside kept going, unbothered. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. They didn't just delete my speech, I whispered. They labeled it worthless. The next morning, I emailed the wedding planner. Her reply was polite, predictable. The AV company trimmed some segments to fit the final highlight reel. Maybe your speech was removed by mistake. A mistake. That word again. I compared the two USBs, mine and theirs. My version was heartfelt, messy, human. Their version was polished, all smiles, all surface. My voice was gone. Every thank you, every line about love being more than blood, cut clean. They didn't lose the file. They chose not to play it. They didn't silence a video. They silenced me. It wasn't the first time. I remembered a dinner party years ago, age 22, home from college, standing awkwardly in heels that hurt my feet. Mom had been showing off Callista's engagement ring to her friends, the light catching on the diamond every time she gestured. This is our pride, she'd said, glowing. Our future family woman. Then, turning to me with a smile too quick, too tight, and this is Rowena, she's independent. Still finding her way. The women nodded, polite, their eyes already drifting back to Callista. The sting wasn't in the words. It was in the shift of air afterward, the tiny pause that told me everyone in the room had silently agreed. Back in the present, I closed the laptop and leaned back. The screen reflected my face in faint blue. I didn't look like the bride anymore. I looked like someone clearing a crime scene. Graham called that afternoon. I let it ring. When he texted, "Everything okay?" I typed 3 words, "It will be," and pressed send. It wasn't true, but it sounded believable. Late in the evening, I reopened the deleted file. I tried to repair it, running a recovery program, line after line of code streaming down the screen. For a moment, a frame appeared, me at the podium, hand shaking slightly, eyes shining with nervous pride. Then the image vanished again. I stopped trying. Instead, I created a new file. I uploaded the original draft of my speech, the one no one heard, to a private link. No tags. No announcement. Just a quiet place in the cloud where my voice still existed. I watched it once. My voice wavered, but it was steady enough. My eyes looked uncertain, but I recognized something behind them, truth, raw and unfiltered. When the video ended, I clicked delete. Not in defeat. In closure. Sometimes dignity isn't in being seen. It's in choosing who gets to hear you. I shut the laptop and walked to the kitchen. The sun had dipped behind the skyline, painting the room in amber. I poured coffee I didn't drink, just for the sound of something filling. It was oddly comforting, the gentle pour, the rising warmth, the reminder that small motions could still belong to me. That night, I dreamed of a voice I hadn't heard in years, my grandfather's. He used to tell me, people will always rewrite the parts of you they can't control. When I woke, I wrote the sentence down on a sticky note and pressed it to my fridge. Days passed quietly. The apartment grew less like a hotel and more like a space that knew me. I worked. I went for walks. I tried to stop checking my phone for updates from people who had already decided I was disposable. Then one afternoon, an email arrived from an unknown address. No subject line. Just a short message, thought you might want this. Attached was a link to the official wedding video, the one posted on Callista's social channels. I clicked. The footage began with drone shots of the venue, Callista's name tagged multiple times in the credits as creative consultant. The video moved through the ceremony, the laughter, the dancing. My face appeared for seconds at a time, smiling, nodding, background noise in my own story. The speech section skipped entirely. Then came the outro, a slow montage of family photos. My parents. Callista and her husband. Even Graham with them, arms around their shoulders. The final text read, "Love makes a family." I closed the laptop, exhaled softly, and whispered to the empty room, "Then I guess I don't qualify." That evening, while scrolling through old files, I found an article saved from years ago about a non-profit that funded women in media arts. I read every line. Something inside me stirred, faint, cautious, alive. They won't see me speak. But they'll feel the echo of what they silenced. I opened a blank document and started outlining a project, a small grant program, nothing big yet. A place for voices cut out of their own stories. My fingers trembled as I typed the title, The Deleted Daughter Fund. The name made me laugh quietly. It sounded sad, but it wasn't. It was honest. Outside, rain began tapping against the glass. The sound was steady, almost rhythmic. I listened for a long time, letting it fill the spaces where apologies should have lived. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. When I turned off the lights, the city reflected in the window, blurred, silver, forgiving. For the first time, the silence felt different. Not empty. Just waiting. The invitation arrived like a courtesy card slipped under a locked door, polite, fragrant, and full of intent. My mother's text read simply, "Family dinner next Friday. We'd love to reconnect. Bring any updates from your architecture firm. Logan is bringing his team." Those lines were measured. Practiced. They smelled of obligation more than apology. I stared at the message until the screen blurred into a soft gray, and then I booked a flight without answering. I did not go because I wanted their forgiveness, I went because I needed to understand the shape of their request. I moved gently through the motions, quietly checking flights, quietly packing, gently breathing through a plan that was mine alone. Soft landing close. Arrival at the family home felt like stepping onto an immaculate stage, curated in neutral tones and polite smiles. Eunice greeted me at the door with a hug that was warm at the surface but cool beneath, the way a finely polished antique can be. Callista hovered nearby, laughter practiced, hair arranged to catch the light just right. Logan stood with a pocket full of charm and that sitter's smile he wore for investors. They ushered me in like a guest of honor, and then, with surgical timing, they handed the mic to Logan for a brief, family update. Logan's voice filled the room with confident detail about expansion plans and networking opportunities in DC, and the air tightened around each syllable. I listened, quietly, as they turned my presence into a resource line item. I breathed slowly, softly, deciding to wait for the exact moment they revealed their hand. Soft landing close. After he finished, the host tapped the glass and said, "And Rowena has a big announcement too." For a beat, I almost believed it was genuine. Then Logan turned toward me and asked, casual as a past dish, "Can you tell them about your penthouse project?" The room shifted. Conversations paused. Eyes drifted to me not with affection, but with calculation. My mouth felt dry. I could have recited talking points. I could have played along, extended the courtesy of my presence into promotion. Instead, I said plainly, the words steady despite the ache, "It wasn't built to be pitched. Especially not by someone who never lifted a brick." Silence pressed like velvet. No one laughed. No one clapped. The air was full of that old, familiar disappointment they specialized in. Soft landing close. Later, in the kitchen away from the assembled crowd, Eunice folded her hands as if practicing sincerity. "Logan just needs a signature," she said, with the soft insistence of someone offering help, not a demand. "A small backing to help him secure a partner in DC, that's all." I felt the old pattern unfold, the polite ask that hid an expectation, the tender voice that carried an edge of entitlement. "You want me to underwrite your son's failure with my name?" I asked quietly. The question sounded cleaner in the air than the answers I had rehearsed. Eunice's face tightened, then smoothed into a practiced concern. "We're family. We help each other. You've always done well, it's time to return the favor." Those words landed like small stones thrown into a pool, each ripple forced a memory up from the lake's bottom. I listened, soft and deliberate. Soft landing close. My memory slid back to that community center award, to the night my design was applauded by strangers and barely noticed at home. I remembered my father's offhand comment, "You should thank Callista for not distracting us this month." It had been a joke then, but it had stung exactly the way a label sinks into soft skin. I let the memory settle, then returned to Eunice's face, tightened, patient, used to getting what she wanted without much fuss. I measured my words carefully, like weighing coins before a purchase. "He can borrow my last name," I said with a thin smile. "If that still carries weight here." Logan's jaw tightened visibly. "We're family," he snapped, the phrase clumsy and sudden, as if someone had taught him to offend with old lines. "You always had to prove things." I held myself steady. The conversation had become what they had intended, a test to see if I would be available when their illusion needed underwriting. Soft landing close. They wanted grateful. They wanted obedience more than sisterhood. They wanted access, not amends. At the dining room table their plates were arranged as art, their conversation arranged as performance. They said things people say when protecting an image, "It's about legacy, we're in this together, you don't understand the pressure on Logan." I watched Logan press his napkin into a fist and saw the man he used to be, the vulnerable boy who wanted applause, fade into someone who expected the world to keep applauding for him. When I asked who had been managing the retirement fund and where the numbers had shifted, the table fell suddenly quiet. That quiet is a dangerous thing in a room full of polished veneers. My voice did not rise. I laid out facts calmly, one by one, naming figures and dates I had researched without announcing my intent. "These documents show transfers last year," I said. "I want to know who authorized them." An aunt attempted a gentle rebuke, "You're making this awkward." The word awkward landed like an accusation, meant to shame me into silence. I smiled slowly and refused the trap. Soft landing close. They upped the pressure, impatience thinly disguised as concern, guilt offered like a well-wrung cloth. "We didn't have options," Eunice murmured. "We had to keep things afloat." Logan leaned forward. "You always had to be dramatic about money. Not everyone wants their life spread across spreadsheets." His tone was casual cruelty, practiced and familiar. I met his eyes without wavering. "This isn't about drama," I said. "It's about truth. Help comes with accountability. Family help doesn't mean entitlement to my name." The words felt like setting a boundary, an act of protection rather than provocation. Once spoken, they loosened something inside me. I felt less fragile than incensed. People around the table exchanged looks, then returned to small talk, like plaster smoothing over cracks in a wall that wanted to fall. I recognized the pattern, they would try to normalize the abnormal until I accepted it. Soft landing close. I left before dessert, packing light and moving with a certainty I hadn't let myself practice in years. On the drive to the airport, my hands were steady on the wheel, my mind working through steps like a contractor checking measurements. I would not let them rent my name for their scaffolding. Back at my apartment, I opened my banking app and began the quiet work I had rehearsed for nights. The transfers were precise, legal, and deliberate. I moved funds where they could not be leveraged against my legacy. It felt clinical and oddly tender, protecting what I had built without needing to announce the defense to anyone. Each transaction closed with a soft confirmation chime that sounded like a small permission given to myself. They had built a legacy off my silence. I was dismantling their leverage while keeping my hands clean. I did this without malice, only necessity. I moved slowly, quietly, gently, making sure the steps were irreversible. Soft landing close. When the last transfer completed, I sat back and let out a breath I had been holding for years. The room felt different, less like a stage and more like a home I claimed. There was no victory in their confusion that night, only a quiet rearrangement of power that would ripple outward in ways I did not yet measure. I did not want ruin. I wanted clarity. I wanted a world where being unseen did not mean being owned. Outside, the city lights blinked with indifference, and inside, for the first time in a long while, my chest felt open to something other than waiting. Healing moved forward, inch by steady inch, softly and without spectacle. The email came through at 3:47 a.m., a time when most things that arrive carry weight. The subject line read, "Initial findings, trust audit." I didn't open it right away. I sat there in the quiet, the soft hum of the refrigerator behind me and the city murmuring in the distance. My body was still. My mind wasn't. I sipped cold water from a glass and imagined the numbers, the signatures, the misaligned dates. I imagined what it would feel like to see my name on a document I never signed. I opened the attachment. The house on Eastwood Drive. My grandfather's gift. The one he always said would be mine. Transferred to Logan 6 months after Papa's funeral. The signature beside the transfer line read, Rowena Vane. But it wasn't my handwriting. Not even close. The lines were curved too neatly. The tail of the R didn't hook like mine. The V looped high, almost artistic. My writing had always been plain, exact. This was someone trying too hard to forge precision. The signature wasn't wrong because it looked bad. It was wrong because it looked performed. I leaned back in my chair, eyes fixed on the screen. The room was dark except for that pale blue glow. It didn't feel like discovery. It felt like confirmation. I whispered to myself, I wasn't written out. I was overwritten. I pulled out the file box I kept under the bed, my personal archive, full of letters, contracts, yellowed papers. I found the original will. Handwritten. Signed in ink that had faded, but still legible. To my granddaughter Rowena Keene, I leave the property on Eastwood Drive. He had underlined it. Twice. I laid both documents side by side on the table. The original and the forged. The truth and the lie. And suddenly, I was 14 again. Standing in the hallway with a late permission slip in my hand. Callista had forgotten hers. I watched Mom take my paper, sign both her name and mine in one smooth motion. It's easier this way, she had said, smiling over her shoulder. Besides, you won't mind. I hadn't, then. I had thought it meant trust. That she trusted me not to make a fuss. Now I knew it meant something else entirely. It meant convenience. It meant erasure. The next day, I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. Rowena, she said, all soft concern, like a pastor who'd just remembered the name of a forgotten parishioner. It's early. Is everything all right? I found the paperwork, I said. A pause. Slight. Measured. I don't know what you mean, she replied. The Eastwood property, I said calmly. The will. The transfer. The signature that isn't mine. There was another pause, longer this time. Then, oh, honey. We didn't think you'd need it. You have your company, your city life, your apartment. Logan. He's here. He has children. He has responsibilities. I let the silence fill the space where outrage wanted to be. You forged my name, Mom. That's not nostalgia. That's a felony. Her voice tightened. Rowena, don't be dramatic. We're family. Sometimes things get handled a little loosely, that's all. That's all? I stared at the wall. Logan was going through a hard time, she added. We were trying to keep things from falling apart. You don't always understand what it's like to carry other people. I closed my eyes. Gripped the arm of the chair until my knuckles turned white. I do understand, I said quietly. That's all I've ever done. She sighed. The kind of sigh meant to end the conversation. Look, if this is about money. It's about integrity, I interrupted. It's about theft. You've always had enough, she said. You didn't need it. That last line struck something deeper than anger. I didn't hang up. I just set the phone down on the table and let her voice fade into air. Later that afternoon, I scanned every document. The will. The false deed. The dates. The title audit. I organized them neatly into a folder and opened my attorney's email. Subject, Eastwood dispute, documented fraud, ready to proceed. I hit send. No rage. No tears. Just the kind of clarity that arrives when illusions finally shatter. I sat back in the chair, let the weight of that moment settle across my shoulders. It didn't crush me. It anchored me. The next morning, I met with the forensic consultant in a quiet coffee shop. She was efficient, professional, and just curious enough to ask the right questions. Why didn't you pursue this sooner? She asked. I stirred cream into my coffee slowly. I think part of me believed it was my fault, I said. That I'd walked away too long. That silence meant I had no claim. She nodded, like someone who'd heard that before. Silence doesn't mean surrender, she said. It just gives them time to build lies. Softly, I agreed. That night, I walked through my apartment with fresh eyes. It felt like mine again. Not a hiding place. Not a showroom. A place where my name was written, legibly, honestly, irrevocably. They thought my silence was surrender. It was scaffolding for strategy. The house they stole was bricks and inheritance. What they tried to steal next was my story. It began on a Tuesday morning, with sunlight spilling through the tall windows of my office. My phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I ignored it at first. Then a text followed from a colleague, "You're on Design Hour. Congrats." I frowned, walked over to my computer, and searched. There it was, my name on the banner of a morning design show, Women Who Build the Future. The segment was airing live. I clicked play. The host's voice filled the room. "Today, we're touring the breathtaking $2 million penthouse designed by architect Rowena Keane." There I was, on screen. My voice floated through the speakers, calm and deliberate. This space was born from silence, and then it started speaking. The camera moved through the rooms, glass walls, curved oak beams, subtle lines inspired by women who had built before me but had been forgotten. The show captured the message exactly as I'd meant it. For 2 minutes, I watched without blinking. Then I saw the comments start appearing on the station's website. Family members. Distant cousins. Even my mother. Mom had reposted the clip to Facebook with the caption, "So proud. Our daughter's success proves family foundation matters." I stared at that word, foundation. It was the same word she'd used years ago when I got my first scholarship. "You should thank us for giving you such a strong foundation." The same word she'd used when she signed away the Eastwood house. It was not pride. It was ownership. Soon the reposts multiplied. My uncle added a tag, "Another success story from the Vane family." A cousin added, "Proud of our legacy." Hashtags followed, Vane legacy, family strength. Someone even uploaded a baby picture of me, captioned, "We knew she'd be special." They hadn't known anything. I walked out to the rooftop garden, phone still in hand, glass of wine untouched on the table. The wind carried the smell of rain from the hills. I watched the screen light up again. Likes. Shares. Comments. A stranger tagged me in a post saying, "Family support really does make a difference." My thumb hovered over the keyboard before typing 4 words, "My success is not a family souvenir." I hit post. The message spread faster than I expected. Some applauded. Some accused me of being ungrateful. One woman commented, "You shouldn't air family issues online." I didn't reply. There was nothing to explain. That evening, I got a message from Callista. "Can't you just let us be proud of you?" she wrote. I stared at it for a long time. My reflection shimmered in the glass wall beside me, still, quiet, older. I typed back, "Be proud of what? The house you forged? The silence you amplified?" The 3 dots that meant she was typing appeared, then vanished. I blocked her. Not from anger. From oxygen. I needed to breathe without her voice crowding mine. I turned my phone face down and looked at the city. The lights were soft, like embers that didn't need to burn anymore. Gently, I remembered the first time I had sent money home. 25, newly hired, working overtime to pay off my student loans. I'd sent $1,500 to Mom for Callista's rent. She texted back, "Callista won't know. Better this way." That money never came back. But it taught me the shape of giving, how it bends until it breaks. The next morning, the design segment hit national circulation. My firm's website crashed from traffic. Sponsors called. Invitations came in. Then an email from Mom. "We should talk. There's a lot of interest in the family name right now. Maybe we could host something, celebrate together." Together. That word had lost meaning years ago. I deleted the message. 2 hours later, an article appeared online, "The Vane Family Legacy, Generations of Design." It included quotes from my mother and Callista. "We've always encouraged creativity in our home," Mom was quoted. "Family comes first. That's what we've taught our daughters." There was even a line about my father, "He taught Rowena to measure twice, cut once." He hadn't taught me that. I'd learned it on my own. He had been too busy teaching Logan to talk louder. The article used photos from the Eastwood house, the same one they'd stolen with my forged signature. I printed the article. Laid it beside the legal folder still open on my desk. 2 worlds, same handwriting of deceit. I didn't cry. I drafted a statement. It wasn't an angry manifesto, just a boundary. To clarify, I wrote, the Vane family no longer represents my professional or personal identity. The foundation of my work is built on independence, not inheritance. I posted it on my firm's site. Within an hour, it trended. Some called it brave. Others called it cold. I called it truth. That night, as twilight sank into the city, my lawyer called. The trust paperwork was ready. A final step that would formally sever all family claims to my estate, my company, my future. I read through every page, each line crisp and measured. I signed where necessary. At the end, I named it, the No Name Legacy Fund. It would support women building new futures, those erased, overlooked, silenced. When the notarized documents arrived the next day, I ran my fingers gently along the embossed seal. Quietly, I said aloud, for every woman who was told she should be grateful for less. The day of the public announcement, my inbox flooded again. Invitations, praise, donations. And then, a final message from my mother. You've made your point, it read. We just wish you'd remember who gave you your start. I typed one line back, I did. Then I hit send and shut the laptop. The sky outside was streaked with orange, the color of endings that don't beg for applause. Softly, I poured another glass of wine and stood by the window, letting the quiet stretch around me. For years, I had let them narrate my life. Now, finally, I had written my own caption. When silence stopped serving them, they tried to summon me with entitlement. It started with a voicemail from Logan. His voice had that same half-impatient, half-accusatory tone I remembered from childhood, the tone of a man convinced that the world owed him convenience. Call me back, Rowena. It's urgent. You've done something with the accounts, right? They said the line of credit's locked. What the hell are you doing? I replayed it twice. The anger in his voice didn't surprise me. The fear did. 2 hours later, my phone lit up again. This time, he didn't wait for voicemail. You're killing my chances, he shouted before I could speak. You froze everything, our shared trust, the old business line. I can't get a loan. Do you even understand what that means for my firm? I do, I said quietly. It means you can't use my name as collateral anymore. That's not how family works, he snapped. Maybe not your version of family, I replied. I'm just removing the free pass. The silence on the other end stretched long and heavy before he hung up. I sat at my desk, breathing in through my nose, out through my mouth, letting the tremor in my hands soften. I'd expected fury, but what came instead was a calm so sharp it almost hummed. That afternoon, a journalist from a national podcast reached out. They wanted to feature the No Name Legacy Fund. I hesitated, knowing what attention invited. But then I said yes. The interview was scheduled for Friday morning. The host asked about architecture, about women in leadership, about legacy. And then, almost offhandedly, she said, "Who inspired your work?" I thought of the long table at home, the forged documents, the 3 empty chairs at my wedding. My mother, I said, voice steady. She showed me what silencing looked like. The host blinked, surprised. That's powerful. I smiled faintly. It was educational. The clip aired a week later and spread faster than any design article I'd ever written. Comments flooded in, some praising courage, some dissecting the meaning, some guessing the backstory. A few sharp-eyed listeners connected dots, remembering old gossip about a Charlotte family split. I didn't read all of it. I didn't have to. The sound of my own words was enough. But the family read it. Eunice's Facebook post appeared the next morning. A long note, perfectly phrased, paired with an old photo of me at 12, sitting on the front porch. Parenting is imperfect, it began. We all make mistakes. But family should remain sacred. I hope my daughters remember that love, not pride, is what binds us. It gathered sympathy instantly. Dozens of comments calling her strong, graceful, heartbroken. And then, one reply from me. Sacred to whom? I posted it without anger, without flourish. The words landed like quiet thunder. Within an hour, her post disappeared. I leaned back, eyes closed, remembering another evening years ago, the gallery show that should have been a beginning. I was 28, standing in a space I'd rented with money scraped from late invoices and side work. The walls held sketches of buildings inspired by forgotten neighborhoods. It smelled like fresh paint and hope. I'd called Mom that afternoon, voice bright. "It's my first solo show. Can you come?" She sighed softly. "Oh, honey, it's a bit last minute. I promised Callista I'd help with the twins' recital costumes. You understand." I said I did. That night, only 3 guests came. I poured wine, smiled for photos, and told myself independence was enough company. Now, years later, her version of Sacred Family echoed in that same lonely space in my memory. The following week, Logan's meltdown went public. He tried to open a new business account using the family trust as reference. The bank declined. Someone leaked the email chain to a local reporter. By Monday morning, the headline read, "Erased Heir Rewrites Her Legacy." The story detailed everything: the Eastwood forgery, the fund, the interview. It didn't come from me. But I didn't correct it. When I walked into my office, my assistant looked up. "They're calling non-stop," she said. "Press. Investors. A few relatives." "Let it ring," I told her. By noon, my mother's number flashed across the screen. I answered this time. "How could you let this happen?" she demanded. "You're humiliating us. The neighbors, people at church, they're calling. You've turned a private matter into gossip." "I didn't forge a signature," I said quietly. "I corrected one. You could have handled this privately." "I tried. You didn't listen." Her tone hardened. "You always think you're better than us." "No," I said, "just different enough to stop pretending." A deep breath on her end. "You'll regret this." "I already did," I said. She hung up. The silence afterward was pure, like oxygen after a storm. Later that week, the podcast clip resurfaced online, captioned by a fan, "When silence becomes self-defense." It trended again, and with it came an unexpected wave of support. Letters from women who had been written out of wills, out of careers, out of families. Their stories filled my inbox like echoes finally released. Gently, I read each one. Some I replied to. Some I just held in my mind for a while. I didn't feel powerful. I felt steady. There's a difference. Meanwhile, family allies began to defect. A cousin messaged privately, "You were right about the house." Everyone's whispering. "She's panicking." By the end of the week, even friends of my mother's stopped commenting under her posts. The perfect image cracked, 1 pixel at a time. But victory didn't taste sweet. It was quiet, like breathing after holding it too long. Then the journalist who broke the story called to confirm quotes for a follow-up piece. "We're naming the article 'Erased Heir Rewrites Her Legacy.' Anything you'd like to add?" I thought for a moment, then said, "Just this: silence is a luxury only the protected can afford." He paused, scribbled it down, and thanked me. When the piece went live, it carried that line at the end, framed like a closing argument. The community response was stronger than I'd expected. Not outrage, understanding. Eunice and Callista began receiving messages from their circle. Polite concern masked as distance. Invitations drying up. One neighbor commented publicly, "I always wondered why Rowena moved away so young." I didn't need to read the rest. The narrative had finally shifted, not through my noise but through their exposure. That evening, I poured tea instead of wine and sat by the window again. The sky was bruised purple, the kind of color that promises change. Softly, I thought of my younger self, the girl who waited for applause that never came, and whispered, "You don't need their permission anymore." The city below buzzed with quiet approval. I watched the lights flicker, small and human, alive with stories untold. For the first time in decades, I didn't feel erased. I felt rewritten, on my own terms. Their backlash came too late. By the time they tried to repaint the story, I had already framed it in truth. You can't undo a portrait that's already been unveiled. The invitation to the gala arrived on heavy ivory paper. The embossed gold letters felt cold against my fingertips. The city of Austin recognizes Rowena Keene, founder of the No Name Legacy Fund. I stared at the words for a long time. They looked final, almost ceremonial, like a line drawn through history. The event took place in a glass hall downtown. Chandeliers reflected like soft constellations above the crowd. I stood near the side stage, breathing slowly, feeling the hum of people settling into their seats. My assistant, Naomi, whispered, "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," I said. When they called my name, the applause rolled forward like a tide. I walked up the steps, each one deliberate, not rushed. On stage, beside the podium, stood a single empty chair. The sign placed on it read, "Reserved for those who never showed up." Gasps moved through the audience. Cameras clicked. The chair glowed under the stage lights like quiet justice. I let the silence linger before I spoke. "This chair," I began, voice even, "isn't here for bitterness. It's here for context." I paused. "This fund is for the girls who were talked over, left out, told their success belonged to someone else. It's for the ones who built quietly while others claimed the credit." A few people nodded. Some teared up. I kept going. Family didn't raise me. Estrangement did. And maybe that's why I believe so strongly in chosen families, the ones we create when bloodline turns into boundary. The applause rose, loud and sustained. For the first time, I didn't flinch from it. As I stepped away from the podium, I looked once more at the chair. The empty space didn't ache anymore. It clarified. Afterward, the crowd surrounded me, donors, journalists, students wanting selfies. Flashes burst like fireworks, and I smiled when I needed to, shook hands when required. But inside, I was calm. Quietly, softly, I felt my pulse steady in a rhythm that belonged only to me. Later, at home, the adrenaline drained into a quiet satisfaction. I poured tea and checked the evening news feed. My speech was everywhere, clips, quotes, think pieces. Headlines read, "Architect turns estrangement into empowerment." I scrolled until I found it. A post from Callista. Her face blotchy, eyes red, a trembling hand clutching a tissue. The caption read, "I just want my sister back. Fame changes people. Family shouldn't be punished for love." I exhaled slowly. It wasn't grief. It was recognition. The same choreography of guilt she'd perfected since childhood. Below the post, thousands of comments. Some sympathetic. Others skeptical. Then another post, my mother's turn. A photo of the two of them together, captioned, "We've all made mistakes. Forgiveness is what family does." Forgiveness. That word again, offered like currency only when they were broke. The phone rang minutes later. My mother's number. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was vague, carefully worded, heavy with pretense. "You've made your point. Let's be a family again. Life's too short for grudges." I replayed it once, twice, then deleted it. There was no grudge left, only truth. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. We finalized the last set of documents that severed all remaining business and legal ties. I signed each page with a steady hand. Every stroke of ink felt like reclaiming oxygen. At the bottom of the final page, I added a note in the margin, effective immediately, "All rights to use or reference my name, image, or brand are revoked." When I handed the papers back, my lawyer gave a small nod. "You're certain about this?" "Yes," I said. "Certainty isn't anger. It's clarity." He smiled softly. "Then congratulations. You've just made peace enforceable." That line stayed with me all day. Peace, enforceable. By evening, the backlash had turned desperate. A cousin texted, "They're unraveling. You okay?" I typed back, "They had a seat. They chose not to sit." Then I turned off the phone and stood by the window. The city was alive below, cars flowing like veins of light, people laughing on sidewalks, someone playing saxophone near the corner cafe. Life moved forward, indifferent but kind. Gently, I remembered the first time I'd been blamed for something I didn't do, 15, Callista breaking the vase in the living room. She cried, I stayed quiet. Mom had grounded me for a week. I still recalled the feel of the hardwood floor under my feet, the sense of injustice sitting heavy but wordless in my chest. That was the first moment I realized silence wasn't innocence. It was permission. Now, decades later, that permission had expired. I sat down, pen in hand, writing a few lines for the fund's next campaign, for every voice that was talked over. For every girl who learned that quiet doesn't mean small. When I read it aloud, my throat tightened, not from sadness, but from release. Somewhere online, Callista's video continued circulating. People debated, analyzed, speculated. I didn't engage. I didn't correct. I didn't need to. The truth was self-sustaining now. Around midnight, a gentle rain began tapping against the glass. I left the window open just enough to hear it. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. The chair from the gala was delivered the next day. They asked if I wanted it stored. I told them no. I placed it in the corner of my office, facing the window. When clients visited, they sometimes asked, "Who's that seat for?" I smiled and said, "Anyone who finally understands absence can be a teacher." Each morning after that, I'd sit with my coffee and glance at the chair. It no longer represented what I'd lost. It marked what I'd reclaimed. I learned quietly, slowly, gently, in ways they never imagined, that peace is not a prize you win. It's a decision you stop apologizing for. They missed their seat at the table. But it didn't mean they stopped knocking. It was a gray morning when the call came from security. The man's voice was hesitant, respectful, the way people sound when they don't know whether to deliver bad news or an inconvenience. "Miss Keene, there's a woman downstairs in a wheelchair asking for you. She says she's your mother." I set my mug down carefully. "Is she alone?" "Yes, ma'am. Says she just needs a minute." Through the window, the sky over Austin was a soft pale wash of light. I could see the gated entrance from my balcony, the faint shape of someone under the awning. Even from a distance, I knew the posture, the way her shoulders curved inward, the tilt of the head that used to scold and bless in the same breath. I didn't move to go down. Instead, I said quietly, "Please bring her water and a blanket. Tell her the gate won't open, but she should rest somewhere safe." He paused. "You don't want to see her?" I swallowed before answering. "Not today." Half an hour later, the guard called back. "She's gone." His voice softened. "She didn't say anything." I whispered, "Thank you," and ended the call. For a while, I stood there with my hands on the counter, feeling the faint tremor that always comes after restraint. I wasn't angry. I wasn't relieved. Just still. Back upstairs, I brewed another cup of tea. My hands didn't shake, but they weren't steady either. The kettle hissed softly, filling the silence with something familiar. I sat by the wide windows where sunlight spilled across the concrete floor. The city below hummed, ordinary and unbothered. My phone buzzed once, an email notification. The subject line read, "From Maya. Maya. The first recipient of the No-Name Legacy Fund." I clicked it open. "Because of you," it read, "I never felt no name. You gave me a seat before I even asked for one. Thank you for proving that being seen isn't a privilege, it's a right." I reread it 3 times, letting the words settle like a warm tide. There was something cleansing in that gratitude, something that didn't demand or disguise itself as guilt. It just existed, simple, genuine, earned. I leaned back, eyes closing, and the years folded over themselves. I was 8 again, standing behind a school curtain in a paper crown, the smell of paint and dust thick in the air. I could hear the audience murmuring, chairs scraping, a teacher whispering cues. My name was called. I stepped onto the stage, scanned the crowd, and found only strangers' faces. The seat where my family should have been sat empty, neat, unclaimed. The play went on. I delivered my lines, small voice echoing in the gym. When the curtain fell, I bowed to no applause I recognized. That memory had used to burn. Now, it only glowed faintly, a scar that didn't ache anymore. Slowly, I opened Maya's second attachment, a short film she'd made with the scholarship money. The screen showed a girl sitting alone in a classroom, her notebook filled with sketches of doors. She stands, walks to the front, and opens one. Behind it, sunlight. The camera pans over the empty desks as a line of text appears, "Family isn't who shows up. It's who lets you become." I pressed pause and let the still image linger. The light in the frame poured out like forgiveness that didn't require permission. There was no grand music, no swelling ending, just quiet strength. I realized then that closure isn't the loud slam of a door, it's the soft click of one opening somewhere else. Outside, clouds thinned. The day stretched wider. I walked to the small table near the couch. On it sat 3 objects, my wedding ring, my press award, and Maya's handwritten note. The ring caught the sunlight, a perfect circle of endings and beginnings. The award gleamed faintly, a reminder of the world that had finally listened. The note, creases worn from being reread, was the only thing that felt alive. I placed the ring inside a drawer. Not out of bitterness, but completion. Some things aren't meant to be displayed, they're meant to rest. Then I opened the window. The air was warm, touched by the scent of distant rain. Somewhere, a bus hissed to a stop, people laughing as they ran across the street. Life moved on, gently unaware of mine, and that anonymity felt kind. For a long moment, I stood there breathing in the hum of it all. The sound of the city, the faint rustle of curtains, the quiet inside my chest. I whispered, not to anyone in particular, I don't hate them. I don't forgive them. I just don't carry them anymore. It wasn't a declaration. It was a release. Behind me, the empty chair in the corner caught a ray of sunlight. Its shadow stretched across the floor, thin and long, touching the edge of my desk. I smiled at it. Sometimes absence really is the best company. Softly, I sat down to write a reply to Maya. My fingers moved without hesitation. You reminded me what I almost forgot, that healing doesn't always look like winning. Sometimes it's just knowing when to stop proving. I hit send and felt a lightness that had no name. As the afternoon faded, I brewed another cup of tea. Steam curled upward, carrying the quiet scent of peace. I watched it dissolve into the air, leaving nothing visible behind, and that nothing felt like freedom. Sometimes, closure isn't a door slamming shut, it's choosing not to knock anymore. If you've ever had to build peace in silence. If you've ever had to walk away from the people who gave you your name. Then maybe this story was meant for you. What does your empty chair represent? Let me know in the comments. And if this story found you at the right time, subscribe for more. More voices. More truths. More healing. Quietly, but powerfully, just like Rowena.